Objection, Your Honor. The room was too polished to echo, but the silence after her objection felt louder than any gavel. Victoria Hale stood tall in her dark gray blazer, sharp lines, no frills, hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her tone had been clear, correct, and by every legal standard, completely justified, but the courtroom reacted as if she'd just thrown a tantrum. Objection, Your Honor, she had said. A few male jurors exchanged smirks. One of the older attorneys across the aisle chuckled into his hand. The judge glanced down from the bench, almost amused. Miss Hale, let's try to remain professional. This isn't an audition. The courtroom laughed. Not loudly, but enough. Victoria didn't blink. Yes, Your Honor, she said calmly. Then may I request that opposing counsel refrain from editorializing and stick to facts? More murmurs. One of the prosecution's lawyers leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing a grin that said, "You're out of your depth, sweetheart." The courtroom wasn't unfamiliar to Victoria. She'd stood in many. But today was different. This was a federal case, high profile, media in the back row, corporate lawyers with silk ties and pedigrees from Ivy Leagues, and she, a 32-year-old defense attorney with no famous name, no firm behind her, no designer suit, and no patience left for games. She looked over at her client, Sophia Reyes, a 19-year-old intern with trembling fingers and wrists still red from handcuffs. The girl looked terrified. But when their eyes met, Victoria gave her a small nod. "I'm still here," the judge cleared his throat. "Let's move on, Miss Hale. And keep your tone measured." Victoria offered a tight smile. "My tone is just fine, Your Honor." "Let's talk about theirs." The courtroom didn't laugh that time. The trial had only just begun. And Victoria had already decided if they wanted a show. She'd give them one. Victoria didn't grow up around people who wore suits, she grew up around people who cleaned them. Her mother worked nights cleaning office buildings downtown, sometimes coming home after sunrise with aching knees and chemical burns on her hands. Victoria would wake up to the smell of bleach and the sound of classical music playing from a small radio in the kitchen, her mother's way of reclaiming dignity. Books were sacred in their home. Every birthday, Victoria got one. And by 11, she had already memorized every line of To Kill a Mockingbird and 12 Angry Men. She didn't want to be a lawyer, she wanted to dismantle everything that made people like her mother invisible. By 17, she had a scholarship. By 25, a law degree from a state school with zero connections. She wore the same black heels for 3 years straight. She learned to read depositions like novels. She trained herself to speak low and slow, because fast-talking women get called emotional. When her classmates were gunning for spots at elite firms, she took public defender work. Rape victims, eviction cases, asylum hearings. She never won popularity, but she earned a reputation. She doesn't flinch. Still, when this corporate espionage case fell into her lap, she knew exactly why. The accused was a teenage intern, brown-skinned, undocumented. The company wanted to make an example of her. A message to others. And no high-profile firm wanted that heat. Too risky. Too political. Too likely to get ugly. So they let the young woman burn until Victoria stepped in. No backers. No media team. No army of junior lawyers behind her, just her voice, her discipline, and the conviction that if they were going to laugh her out of that courtroom, they'd have to do it through clenched teeth. The case file was thinner than it should have been. A few digital records. A vague report from the company's IT team. A blurry screenshot of an internal database supposedly accessed without permission. And a statement, barely legible, from a mid-level manager claiming he'd seen Sophia Reyes acting suspicious. That was it. Yet somehow, the prosecution had turned it into a full-blown corporate espionage trial. Victoria read every word twice. Then a third time. Something didn't sit right. The timeline was too clean. The access logs too perfect. The kind of evidence that's been reviewed more for appearance than accuracy. Sophia, meanwhile, barely spoke above a whisper. She was terrified, not just of prison, but of being deported, of ruining what little life her family had built after crossing the border 5 years earlier. "I didn't take anything," she said. "I swear." Victoria believed her, but believing wasn't enough. Not here. Not in a courtroom stacked with legacy names and lawyers who called her miss like it was a form of mockery. On the other side of the courtroom, the prosecution looked like a catalog of polished confidence. 3 lawyers, all men, all well into their 40s, all smirking as if this case had already been won. Their lead counsel, Richard Payne, had a reputation for being ruthless and smug. He referred to Sophia as the defendant even when looking straight at her. He called her a well-trained mole in a corporate nest. The tabloids loved it. Victoria had heard Payne once told a young female associate, "If you want to win a case, lose the eyeliner." Now, here he was, trying to bulldoze a teenage girl and her, but Victoria had a habit of being underestimated, which is exactly how she liked it. By day 3 of the trial, the message was clear: the courtroom was not her arena, it was their playground. Victoria couldn't finish a sentence without someone cutting her off. Every objection was met with eye rolls. Every valid argument was reframed as emotional. She knew the tactic. Exhaust her. Undermine her. Box her into silence. And the judge? He let it happen, not overtly. He never shouted her down. He just let things slide. A sarcastic tone here. A smirk there. The prosecution's interruptions? Brushed off as spirited exchanges. Her responses? Labeled combative. Richard Payne was the worst. "Miss Hale," he said on cross-examination, "I understand your passion, but this isn't a protest march. It's a court of law." The gallery chuckled. Victoria stared him down. "My client is facing a decade in prison, Mr. Payne. You're right, it's not a protest. But it is injustice. And that's always worth raising your voice for." The judge banged his gavel. "Enough." Payne smiled. He was winning, in perception, if not in substance. The media headlines mirrored his narrative: rookie attorney melts down in high-stakes case. Defense loses control. The courtroom is no place for passion. Back in the waiting room, Sophia looked at Victoria with tears in her eyes. "Are they going to lock me up?" Victoria knelt beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not if I have anything to say about it." She looked calm, but inside, a fire was building. They wanted to see her break. Instead, they'd watch her rise. Victoria stopped speaking so much, she listened, while the prosecution preened and postured. She took notes, quietly, precisely. Every sentence Payne delivered, every spreadsheet he cited, every timestamp he bragged about. She mapped it all out like a battlefield, and then, on the 4th afternoon, it happened. They called a junior data analyst to the stand. Nervous. Eager. Over-rehearsed, he testified that the system breach had occurred at 11:42 p.m., with Sophia's login credentials from a company-issued laptop. "Are you sure?" Victoria asked. "Yes. Absolutely." "Did you pull that log yourself?" "No. Our team lead handled the actual retrieval." "Did you verify it?" A pause. "I reviewed the summary." Victoria nodded, then pulled a printed exhibit from her briefcase. It was dense, metadata from the actual log file. "According to this," she said, "the breach was recorded on a Sunday. But that laptop, per your own inventory logs, had been logged into company repair at 8 a.m. that morning. Care to explain how a broken device accessed your server 11 hours after it was turned in?" Payne stood. "Objection, irrelevant." The judge hesitated. "Overruled, for now. The analyst blinked rapidly. I'll have to check with my team. I suggest you do, Victoria said. Because either your evidence is faulty, or someone manufactured a timeline. The gallery murmured. Payne scribbled something angrily. Victoria sat back down. She didn't smile, but her client did. For the first time since her arrest, Victoria knew it wasn't enough to win, not yet, but it was the first crack, and all she needed was one. By the fifth day, the courtroom was colder. Not in temperature, something else. Something quieter. The laughter had stopped. Victoria stood with a stack of documents under her arm, eyes locked on the next witness, Gregory Langston, chief security officer of the tech firm accusing Sophia. He was confident, polished, rehearsed. A man who had been in court before and had never been made to sweat. Victoria intended to change that. Mr. Langston, she began, you testified that the breach originated from an IP address within your office, correct? Yes. And that you personally verified the logs? I did. She handed him a page. Can you confirm that this is the same log? He looked it over. Yes. Perfect, she said. So you can also confirm that this access, on the date in question, happened at 11:42 p.m.? Yes. Victoria paused. Mr. Langston, where were you at that time? He blinked. Excuse me? You're the system administrator. You had master access. You were working late that night, were you not? Yes. She nodded, flipping to another page, and yet, this access happened from your IP, your device, logged in under your username, for a session lasting 9 minutes, during which the proprietary files were copied. Payne stood up. Objection, this is a smear campaign. Victoria didn't even look at him. This isn't a smear, Your Honor. It's an audit trail. The judge allowed it. Langston's hands fidgeted. I may have left my workstation unattended, while logged into the most secure partition of your servers? Silence. Then Victoria said the line that would make the front page the next morning. Mr. Langston, are you suggesting that a teenage intern, without administrative clearance, somehow bypassed all internal security, guessed your password, and logged in under your name, from your desk, while you were present? He froze. The jury leaned in. Victoria didn't need a confession, she had something better. Doubt, asterisk. They came for her the next morning. Motion to censure. Alleged misconduct. A formal complaint filed by Payne himself, claiming Victoria had engaged in unprofessional conduct, bordering on slander. It was a strategy, obvious, desperate. Discredit her before the jury connected the dots too clearly, the judge called a sidebar. Victoria stood alone across from 3 suits and a bench that had never been neutral. You're accusing opposing counsel of criminal acts, the judge said coldly. That's a serious charge. I haven't accused anyone, Victoria replied. I've asked questions. Questions based on company documents, server logs, and sworn testimony. She's grandstanding, Payne snapped. Trying to create theater. Victoria turned to him, calm as ever. No, Mr. Payne. I'm just not afraid of your stage. The judge rubbed his temples. I'll allow her to continue, within limits, he said. Any more suggestions of internal wrongdoing, and I'll sanction you, Miss Hale. Victoria nodded once, understood. Back at her table, Sophia looked terrified. Are they going to stop you? Victoria leaned in, voice low but steady. They'll try. Sophia's hands were trembling. But here's the thing, Victoria continued. They're used to women folding, not fighting. She opened her folder and pulled out a sealed envelope, the one she'd been waiting to use since day one. Inside it was a forensic report from a third-party cybersecurity expert. One name stood out in the header, Gregory Langston, and a word typed in bold across the bottom, manipulated. Victoria slid it into the evidence pile, quietly, precisely. She didn't need to shout, she just needed to wait. Victoria waited until the afternoon to strike. She asked to recall a witness, Amira Patel, a systems engineer who had worked under Gregory Langston before being reassigned without explanation. Payne objected. Of course, new witnesses? This is procedural ambush. But Victoria was ready. She's already listed in the original discovery package. They just didn't bother to call her. The judge hesitated, then allowed it. Amira took the stand, nervous but firm. Victoria began softly. Ms. Patel, you worked on the company's data compliance team? Yes. You had access to the internal backup servers? Yes. And did you ever notice anything unusual in the logs the week before the alleged breach? Pause, yes. I flagged a discrepancy. Victoria nodded. Can you tell the court what you found? Amira took a breath. The access logs had been modified. The original timestamps were different from the ones presented as evidence. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victoria walked to the evidence cart and pulled out a printed report. This was your memo to Mr. Langston, correct? Yes. And what was his response? He told me it was a formatting issue. Then I was reassigned to another department. No explanation. Victoria turned to the jury. In that memo, Ms. Patel warned of altered metadata, evidence tampering. That report was never submitted to the court. She placed it in front of the judge. This is a third-party forensic audit verifying her claim. It proves the log file presented by the prosecution was altered after the arrest. Dead silence. No smirks. No laughter. Just eyes wide and staring, at Payne, at Langston, at the judge. Victoria let the silence stretch, then she said one word, shall we continue? The courtroom was full, but no one moved, not the jurors, not the press, not even Payne, whose hands now gripped the edge of the table like he was holding on to the last thread of control. The judge read the final forensic report in silence. His eyes narrowed. His fingers tapped against the wood. Victoria didn't speak. She didn't need to. She had built her case like a trap, not with fire, but with precision. And now it had snapped shut. After a long pause, the judge turned to the jury. You've heard all arguments. You may deliberate. It took them 40 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood, voice steady. We find the defendant not guilty on all counts. Sophia burst into tears. Her mother, seated behind her, gasped aloud, hands flying to her mouth. One of the jurors nodded, subtly, toward Victoria. The judge called for order, but there was no stopping the shift in energy. Even the press, once quick to label Victoria as inexperienced, now leaned forward, scribbling frantically. Before adjourning, the judge looked over his glasses. I must commend the defense for their unusually thorough examination of the digital evidence. This court is rarely so challenged by a first-chair attorney, especially one with no firm behind her. Victoria bowed her head slightly. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted her name, but she didn't speak. She took Sophia by the hand and walked out the back door, not for attention, not for applause, but because she had come for something far more dangerous, respect. The offers came fast. Interviews, law firm proposals, TV networks wanting the woman who brought down Langston. They offered money, exposure, book deals. Victoria ignored them all. She returned to her small, second-floor office above a laundromat. Same desk. Same dented chair. Same leaky window. That afternoon, a young woman knocked on the door, nervous, holding a folder of law school applications. I watched the trial, she said. I I've never seen anyone like you up there. Victoria smiled softly. There are more of us than you think. The girl hesitated. What if I don't fit in? Victoria leaned back in her chair. Then don't. Make them uncomfortable. She handed the girl a copy of the trial transcript, marked up in red ink. Start here. Outside, traffic passed like nothing had happened. Inside, a quiet revolution had already begun. Victoria didn't need applause. She had already changed the room, without raising her voice, without permission, and now, without stopping.